Well, welcome back. We hope that you enjoy the sports segment, but we also told you that we want to have some great conversations, especially relating to the issues of internal conflicts, not only in our country, but also transitioning into the whole West African sub-region. And what a way for us to do this conversation than with one of the best organizations that is always into policy formulation, but also research, and also undertaking a lot of conversations and interactions with various governments, civil society, and the media and the public over the last 20 years since their inception. And they're marking those two great decades of existence right here on our platform and other relevant platforms they have. And we're talking the West African Network for Peace. They started as the West African Network for Peace building. Emmanuel Bombani had been there, but now they also have churned out some great people who are really helping improve internal conflict and the resolution of issues when it comes to conflicts in the sub-region. Well, we have Dr. Chukwu Emeka Eze. He is the Executive Director for WANEP, and he's here. Good morning to you, Doc.
Thank you very much for having me.
And it's always good to have you in the studio. But WANEP has gotten this great reputation as being one of the foremost organizations when it comes to trying to make sure that they put all the pieces together when it's already broken in many of the respective countries that you've all operated in. How many countries are you well established in so far?
We exist in all the 15 ECOWAS member states. Our head office is here in Ghana, and as you are aware, like you rightly said, we have been in existence now for 20 years. We started actually in 1998, but officially our operation started in 1999.
When it comes to conflicts in the sub-region, there's always this notoriety West Africa seems to have had over the last 30 years, or 35 years. It's for WANEP, what would you say it's the main rallying point for that perception to always hold?
Well, I think we had one of the worst civil conflicts on the continent of Africa. If you remember, you will recall the conflicts and the carnage that existed in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Guinea-Bissau, in Guinea-Conakry, and so on and so forth. So it is right for people to have that perception. But I also think that one of the things that has occurred to West Africa is that those experiences has also endeared us to the kind of conflict resolution and conflict prevention mechanisms that we have developed ahead of even so many other regional economic communities that now come back to West Africa to learn the kind of approaches and mechanisms that we adopt as a sub-region. And you also will recall that even the establishment of WANEP is post some of those unnecessary and very vicious cycle of civil wars that existed at those times.
Yeah, of course, we don't tend to have maybe the escalation of the conflict as it is, as we witness over the period within the sub-region. But it looks like what is now festering is the pockets of internal conflicts in the respective countries. For you, doing the monitoring of the observation, is that a concern for you, and why would that be?
It's a huge concern. If I look at some of the issues we have had in the region and where we are heading to, I think there are some positive aspects, but there are some worrisome aspects. The positives also includes the fact that there are a lot of expertise now on the region. There are a lot of people who are engaged in different aspects of peace and security that can actually intervene, so we can boast of internal expertise to deal with some of these issues. We can also boast of some organizations, including even our own regional economic community, ECOWAS, and what we have been doing so far. But the negatives, of course, like you rightly said, we are no longer looking forward to a situation where Ghana would be engaged in a civil war or an international conflict or inter-country conflict. We are now dealing more with internal issues. But I think also that is the reason behind that is not far-fetched. We are coming from a period of over 300 years of slave trade, taking us to another 200 years of colonialism and then some aspects of neo-colonialism. And that also informed the kind of states that emerged in so many of our countries in Africa. Now, post that colonial period, we also had an intrusion into the body politics of most of the West African countries. I think apart from probably Senegal, right, almost all other countries in West Africa had series of military regime. So the democratic institutions and the establishment of democratic ethos is relatively new in West Africa. And therefore, we are coming from a period of consolidated autocracy and moving towards consolidated democracy. And what you expect are the fact that people want now to express themselves in different ways. There are so many things that have gone wrong during the colonial regime, during the military regime, that people now want to assert themselves under a democratic setting. And we don't have the kind of skills to confront some of these issues. And we are also moving from a period of traditional leadership to the modern state. What the modern state, in our opinion, did not do is to take cognizance of some of the traditional mechanisms of resolving disputes into the modern state. And therefore, the modern state prepared more for wars and conflicts and how to defend the nation than how to entrench a culture of peace.
So is it that maybe during the transition generationally, especially having the antecedent of military interventions and their influences, perhaps maybe we've not done the psychological transition very well, and so we have a generation that is said to be young across the subcontinent, but we still have some of these remnants of what may have been experienced generations past?
On one path, yes. But also on the other path is that we had established dispute resolution mechanisms at the traditional level. We had good culture. We also had some level of conflict prevention mechanism. Remember, every night the communities, through probably the village head, will sit together under a tree and try to talk about their issues. There were channels of discussing those issues. There were also channels through which people were able to notice that a foreigner is in our vicinity and how to confront those issues. The society is expanding on a daily basis. What I think has not happened effectively is, did the modern state foresee the fact that tomorrow is no longer possible for you to know your next neighbor? I don't think so. So what are the mechanisms through which we can match what happened in the past with the modern state? That's on one path. The second thing is, as citizens, as we begin to have new economic adventures, and as we begin to have family values change to the extent that nobody's at home to educate the kids through informal education, the norms, the values, the cultures of the society. What did the modern state do to incorporate all those ideas into the school curriculum? So we need to go back. We need to step back and reflect. And that's why this 20th anniversary of ONEP, we are not just focusing on the celebration. We are looking, the theme is the future and the futures of peace and security in West Africa. We are looking at, so what next do we need to do? We have come thus far. The issues of policies are no longer a problem. The issues of expertise are no longer a problem.
But we have them.
We have them. What we now need to do is, how do we translate this at the traditional setting so that we can confront what you exactly said about local and communal conflicts.
Yeah. And if you take a look at it over the last 20 years, many of the countries have been going back and forth, but now are doing the transition into what we call the more stable democratic dispensation. And even for those that are not towing the line, are being whipped into line, so to speak, even when they digress. So you get to find out within the respective countries and pair the experiences that you have as well. If it's a police service or the parastatals of the state, you'll find that the way they operate are the same. Their engagement with the citizenry is also the same across the sub-region. You'll be surprised. You may go to Nigeria and think that maybe the way the police are operating is just the movement of the personnel, the same. And so for Ghana, for example, the focus is about party militias and vigilantism and the way their reactions are and their intertwining with the political class, etc. How is that pervasive in the sub-region? And as a country, how do we do that level of delineation?
There's a huge gap between the states and the citizens. And that also affects state institutions. There is more affinity. Citizens' affinity is more to the communities than to the states. And that's not far-fetched. During the colonial era, the citizens saw the states as alien, that which belongs to the colonialists. And therefore, what were those indicators with which they associated the state with? Tax collection, whipping us against our will to the line, entrenching a kind of administrative procedure alien to us. The exit of the colonialists brought in a bit of the military. The military almost continued in that trajectory. And the greatest institution that suffered under the military was the civil police. Because if the military equipped the police, they got scared about their own future in the body politics. Because if the military had the kind of equipment that the army had, they probably would also overthrow them one day. So the police suffered. So some of the police policies that you see today are recovering from what the military made them to be. Now, what that also means is that the police needed to find its base within the communities. How then do you think the citizens will view the police? Most of them were the police of the colonial masters, used to collect taxes from them. If you ask people the traditional names they even gave the police, you will see some elements of fear. They associate them with either the baton or the beating or with the confrontation. So the police is trying to now do what you can call citizen-police relationship through community policing. That's also new in itself. It is going to take a while. Now, the other thing is also that I feel so strongly that crimes are getting digital. The equipping of the police is taking such a long time to confront digital crime. And I remember in the past, when I was heading one up in Nigeria, I did an article which I said it is no longer possible to confront digital crime with analog policing. That cannot work. So what level of intelligence do we have in the police today? Who are those that are prepared to voluntarily go to the police? What about police remuneration? So all that affects, how does the citizens view the police, the confidence level, the trust deficit that exists? How then does the citizen give information to the police? All that will take a while. And that is what is taking place in most of the societies in West Africa today.
And you take Ghana, for example. There is the perception that the trust for the police, if not has waned, or need to be regained. But these historical antecedents that you paint would also mean that it would take some time for us to get there, or the transition and the consolidation to be achieved. Who has to point that out so that the society would then acknowledge and be receptive to the way they are operating now, and saying that, well, maybe they can't tackle party militias because maybe they're afraid of their mode of appointment, and they could be removed, and all those points that we tend to allude to them?
I don't think it's for a single institution. I think that the police is also having a lot of retrospection. I remember being invited by the Inspector General of Police to a think tank meeting to look at the transformation of the police. So the police itself is aware that they need to transform to be able to cope with the modern state and modern crime. But I also think that one of the gap that exists is the gap between the police transformation agenda and the national development agenda. Now, we have a situation where you have transition in government, and every government comes with its own ideology. Every government comes with its own development plan. that is not going to translate to the kind of transformation that the police want, because the police transformation agenda will also find its footing on the national development agenda. What that means is that the two key political parties in Ghana need to come together to agree on a 20-year, 30-year plan that, irrespective of the party in power, all of them will key into that development agenda. So you'll be evaluated on the basis of the progress you have made on that national development agenda rather than a new agenda for your government. That way the police can look forward to each of the government in power, how much they've been able to contribute to its transformation agenda. But so long as each political party comes to power and have its own agenda, it will truncate what the police have as its own transformation agenda. But more importantly, there are some gaps in laws. I did tell you that what we have been doing over the years, not just in Ghana, but in the entire sub-region, is that we try to reform existing laws. There's a basis to which you can reform what the foundation in itself did not have the strong hold as it relates to the society. Those laws were not made to reflect the modern state and a state that is reflective of the citizens. Those laws were made by few individuals that wanted to stay more in power and therefore crippled.
Do we acknowledge here in Ghana, and if you take the rest of the West African countries, that we have still laws and they need to be remodernized to come to terms with the existing perceptions, the norms, and the way people live and they want to interact with the police and other security agencies of state?
I should think there is acknowledgement. Whether we have mustered the political will to deal with those issues holistically, I think we are short of that. Again, remember, there is the knack for us to have an ECOWAS community. And what that means is that we are trying as much as possible to dismantle the walls that divide the ECOWAS member states, the 15 ECOWAS member states. That also in itself means that we need to begin to rethink our approach to peace and security, especially as it relates to security agents, because you cannot have an ECOWAS community and have police that separates itself by walls. So it's also important to begin to think of an ECOWAS community police, in which case crime in Ghana cannot find a hiding place in Togo or in Nigeria. But we have not done that. We are still operating more and more national police within a space we now call a community. So that's something that needs to be discussed at the level of the authority of heads of state and government. But that also is in itself a way to also improve the original concept of ECOWAS, which is economic integration. You cannot have economic integration that in itself also comes across with crimes and criminalities without having an ECOWAS community policing focus.
We had the Emil Short sittings, especially on what transpired at Ayawaso West Wogon during the by-election. And the commentary, subsequently when we had the responses from the witnesses who came in, either they were victims or they were supposed to be party militia, or members who have been transitioned or have been able to be integrated into national security setup, not having, based on the criticism, not having the right sort of qualification, education, the expertise, etc., to even go through the benchmark and to get accepted. Now, if we have to say that we want a proper structure of policing, and we want to prevent the parties from having armed people just because they mistrust the government and the way the police is set up, how do we do side by side also taking cognizance of the fact that then the normal structure of education for the population, for a youthful population, need to be right in such a way that they may not find themselves or be enticed if they have to be recruited by a party strongman or a godfather, etc.
I've said this in several fora. I think the first set of people that should show confidence in the police are the political actors. It's either you're in government or you're government in the waiting. That's why you're opposition. But that's not what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing is that not just the government in power, but also the opposition, they all have displayed some level of lack of confidence in the police by recruiting non-state actors to provide them extra security. So what information are you now passing to the citizens? If those in power and those waiting to be in power are using such private groups to guard and protect them or protect their party affairs or political affairs, you send a bad signal to the citizens that you can also take laws into your hands. So that for me is a low for the two key political parties in Ghana. The other thing also is that I'm not very sure whether the political actors understand that that's also a minus in terms of the credentials of Ghanaian democracy. That in itself is a huge minus. If you look at where Ghana has gotten to with this democratic ethos, the deepening of democracy and all of that, and something as little or as big as militia groups are now providing the basis through which people are saying that this democracy is too fragile, then that for me also is something to reconsider. But like you said, I think there are some structural issues that need to be addressed. The issues of poverty, the issues of unemployment, the issues of urban crime. So long as the rural areas are not being developed, the future of conflict and crime in West Africa will be that of urban cities, because people will continue to troop en masse to where they think they will see some level of greener pasture. Agriculture is no longer working the way it's supposed to work. And that's the main economic stay in the rural areas. The things that people enjoy in the urban cities, electricity, pipe bomb water, good roads and all of that. So long as those in the rural areas don't have it, they will continue to troop to the urban cities. And then what will suffer? Infrastructure will suffer. The existence of key infrastructures in most cities in West Africa, they were not built for tomorrow. They were built to confront the problems of that day. And now we are having on regular basis influx of citizens and non-citizens alike in those cities. So there's competition on the existing infrastructure. There is serious pressure on them. And that accounts for some of the things we are seeing in those cities. Now, you can't have those levels of citizens that we see with such level of energy. That energy must be exhausted somehow. And unfortunately, those kind of groups happen to be one of the areas where they think they can exhaust the quantum of energy they have in themselves.
Yesterday, just to review the literature and the reading for this interaction, I came across a number of literature or writings from one Esther Anan, we had a Folabi and a couple of them, a writing in the issues of conflict, etc., in which there was a certain mindset to try to link a certain socio-cultural mindset and setting to godfatherism, trying to have some level of allegiance because of our traditional setting, and so that has transitioned to be having armed people around top political elite who feel that they need to have that sort of allegiance. Psychologically will give them some kind of respect, and you know, and how is that a reason why perhaps the political class could not have some confidence in the existing security structures we have, the police structures we have?
I doubt that there is a single reason for that. I think it's multifaceted. I'm not sure whether even in developed democracies they don't have some level of godfathers and those who you can term to be kingmakers. But how do they play? Do they play within the boundaries of the rules? How do they portray themselves even within the context of being kingmakers or godfathers and godmothers? I think to an extent you can say yes, our traditional setting is such that most people have always had allegiance to one structure or one individual or the other. But I think that the modern democracy in itself comes with certain rules and procedures. And so long as you go outside of those boundaries, you're against the law. And I don't think that one of them, no matter the kind of explanation we want to give as the socio-cultural or socio-economic reasons that give birth to some of these groups, at the end of the day, there is an action and there's a reaction. Some of those actions are inimical to the law, and so long as they are so, the states have a responsibility to ensure that it does not happen.
And the conversation right now is for, in Ghana, the two main parties, the NPP and NDC, to have a certain dialogue. And the argument is that they need some ombudsman or some other neutrals to also be the bridge and make sure that the conversation is well situated. Is that a first point by which then the dialogue could result in resolving the confusion that has now been brought up to the landscape?
I am excited and really very happy that the two main political parties are taking that decision. It shows they are responsive to the outcry of the citizens. I think also that the media did very well to highlight the menace of the vigilantism and what that does to the democracy of the country and the peace and stability. But I'm very pained that the dialogue in itself is caught up in rhetorics to the extent that they now seem to be investing their energy in the media than in the actual dialogue. There's some level of back and forth that, in my opinion, are totally unnecessary. One of the key successes or principles of dialogue is some level of confidentiality. The issues are out there in the public domain. The processes of the resolution cannot also continue to go in the public domain. So, the issue itself is complex. The method of resolving the issue cannot also be complex. So I think that when negotiation fails all over the world, you need a third party to restart that negotiation. I'm not sure whether the two main political parties have sat down to design this dialogue. Once you don't design a dialogue, this is what you get. You can't go into a dialogue without designing the dialogue. What nature will the dialogue take? Who will be the convener? Who will be the facilitator if need be? Who are those that are going to be there as observers? And so on and so forth. What are the parameters? What do we want to achieve? All these are not being discussed. So the idea of writing letters, sending it to the media to read to the public, as far as I'm concerned, from both sides, they are simply either buying time or not being sincere or not also understanding the rudiments of dialogue.
Is it that they don't have the expertise, or perhaps you think it could be deliberate based on a faraway observation?
No. Politics is played within a certain realm, and everybody who is in politics or political parties are always looking for public sympathy, and they are looking for numbers, because elections are won on numbers. So how you portray yourself to the public determines the amount of votes you get. So they are all trying to be nice people.
So they are playing to the gallery.
They are all trying to be nice political parties. But also there are also issues relating to ego, in my opinion. So, but all that, once there is a willingness to resolve, which they have demonstrated, I think the rest is process management. Process management. In so many instances, when two actors are involved, you need an interlocutor to be the process manager. Let them continue to own the conflict, but they need a third party that will manage the process.
And who should do the appointment? Who should be the mediator? Who should ideally be?
It could be one, it could be more than one. In this instance, Ghana is the only country in West Africa with an established, through an act of parliament, a national peace architecture. That in itself is a huge resource. So it's not that they are trying to see who they appoint as the mediator. There is already a state institution.
That's the National Peace Council.
The National Peace Council with a mandate. Mandate is very important in dialogue and mediation. These people are not just coming with good office. They are coming with a mandate backed by the law. So the National Peace Council will now decide, is this something we want to go on our own? Is this something that we will ask each of them to nominate a mediator, which is an option? So NPP nominates a mediator, NDC nominates a mediator, the National Peace Council comes as the neutral mediator. Then you can have three institutions mediate the process. Or, I wouldn't even want to call it mediation, facilitates the negotiation process between the two political parties. So the National Peace Council can also say, okay, we are the lead mediators, but we also need one or two other institutions to support us. It depends on the context analysis that will inform who else will join the National Peace Council in doing that, if they so wish.
So do you think the two parties then are holding back? Maybe they're afraid of too much commitment, even though they are publicly committed?
Unfortunately, you can't establish that if you have not gone through the process. Those fears and concerns are what the third party will help them to make sure they address. You are right. There are issues of concerns and fears, which is why they might not easily let go. Okay? It happens in DDR when people are not sure of what they are going to get after they are disarmed. But those fears, once they are addressed, everybody is ready to let go.
There's always a concern about how do we, because in a proper conflict situation, the DDR processes will be undertaken in which there will be some level of integration. And we have people who have been given some form of rudimentary orientation and have been operating over time. How do they fit in?
No, in this instance, we've not gone through war. So yes, the atrocities committed are not so difficult to forgive, as it were. We've not gotten there. So it might not even be DDR. It might just be a simple D and R, so maybe just disarm and get reintegrated into the society. But that's a first step.
Now, the people want to be policemen, soldiers, etc. What do you do to them? They want to be...
That's a first step. The second step, because you also don't want a situation where people think that when you do the wrong thing, you get compensated at certain level with being a member of the police. Even if you want to be a police officer or a military person, there must be vacancy, there must be call for it, you still go through the procedure. And if you qualify, then you become. But I think that there is need to have a separate conversation in terms of the post-disbanding of the vigilante groups, which will involve both the government and development partners, private business sectors, the private businesses, and how they make contributions to ensure that we have a peaceful environment. It's not enough to say you disband. When you disband, you have to re-engage. And the re-engagement, I've said it severally, the re-engagement must be something that is commensurate with whatever they are getting with the current position they occupy.
Is this something that is only peculiar to Ghana? The political parties having machoed armed groups or young men following political parties and the elite?
They exist in almost all the countries in West Africa. The only difference probably is how organized they are with nomenclatures. So in Ghana, they are associated with names and probably associated with one political party or the other. In some other countries, including even in Nigeria, they form what they call the youth wing. Those youth wing also come with a lot of baggage. In some other places, they call it our foot soldiers. They come with different names. However, in those countries, they may not be as organized as it is here, because what they do is that during the election, they simply recruit. Okay? If you go to places like the Niger Delta region, they may work for you today, and tomorrow they will come to kill you too. So they work for another person. It depends on what their terms of engagement. So they do not necessarily belong to one person.
That's very mercenary.
They do not necessarily belong to one person or one political party. They are just people who are ready to do the bid of politicians when they are called upon.
But if we transition into other conflict problems that we have in the country, for example, we just had the conflict in Tripoli, in which we had 3 people dying and over 1,000 displaced in the process. And it's all because there are inherent red herrings, flashpoints of issues, either tribally or families or between communities, etc. Is it that we're not picking the right sort of intelligence?
I think that conflict is very unfortunate, and especially at this time of the history of Ghana, that communal conflict still takes lives. And in this instance, most of the cases have to do with people who over the time have been together, who live together, who are in one way or the other related. But I think that some of these pockets of violence is a call for us to begin to think of a new way of engaging in conflict transformation. I think over the years, we have come under an assumption that you resolve conflict and the conflict is over. I think we now need to invest more in conflict transformation, which means we need to have structures, we need to have linkages, we need to have a holistic approach to conflict management and conflict resolution, which means we go back to some of these societies and evaluate what exists in terms of conflict management and see how we strengthen it, and also begin to link them to other institutions in case they are not able to manage those conflicts. I think what happens to most people in the community is that if they feel that either justice will be too delayed or that it will never come, they take laws into their hands. So if there are communities in Ghana today that have established traditional mechanisms of resolving disputes, how do we strengthen that? How do we stop making an assumption that once you're a traditional ruler, you have conflict resolution skills? You may have convening power because of the office you occupy, but does that also mean you have the skills to resolve conflict? Sometimes not so. So how do we support these traditional institutions that the people respect very well to be able to also play the role of conflict resolution? But beyond that, how do we invest in the decentralization of the National Peace Council? It's working very well at the national level. There needs to be more support at the regional and the district levels so that they can do the same job they are doing at the national level. And I think National Peace Council itself have always maintained that they want the same level of engagement at the national level, at the regional and district level. That has not happened to the best of my knowledge.
It's a good point you mentioned there. Then is it that as a country, and even as countries in the sub-region, or even as a country, when we spend the amount of resources that we tend to spend and quell or foil conflicts, and then the post-heat period, we keep sending security there with war. Is this something that's lacking in maybe dialogue or trying to pick intelligence or perhaps even trying to see how the integration of the community could be done post the main conflict period?
You see, the point is that conflict exists in some kind of cycle. So, post-conflict is simply that the arms are dropped, right? So, if care is not taken, it can go back to pre-conflict, go back again to crisis stage, and then begin to de-escalate again.
Why?
Because we are talking about human beings. We are talking about relationships. Conflict does not exist without relationship. There must be a stake that two parties have on a particular thing before they can go into conflict. So they've not stopped relating with one another or with each other. So it means that whatever caused the conflict could still come again. So the process of conflict transformation is what I don't see us investing. Secondly, I did tell you that the modern state became much ready, always, very well prepared for wars and for quelling conflict than investing in peace. So ask yourself, the modern state, how much do they invest every year in acquiring military hardwares? And how much do they invest in peace training? What budget? So ask National Peace Council, for example, what is its budget? And ask the security agents who are trained for wars, how much.
Why is it that we have that lack of proper assessment and proper allocation and proper policy direction in terms of what needs to be done at the right time and what is important first before the other or alongside?
There is a move now, even at the level of United Nations, to focus more and invest more in conflict prevention. The nature and the dimensions of those conflict prevention is part of what we are querying next week in our 20th anniversary, because we do not feel that conflict prevention means the same thing everywhere. In Europe, in America, in developed countries, I'm not sure whether they are still talking about education as fundamentals for conflict prevention. Here we need to talk about that. So we are querying the United Nations normative framework and policy on conflict prevention. How does that translate to conflict prevention in Africa, for example? Those are the kind of things we want to query. I think that the modern state is such that they are built on elements of power. And I'm using power here in quotes. So how do we show that the Ghanaian military is stronger than the Togolese military? Is by the amount of arms we have. And the modern states also felt, and that's also one of the theories of war, that if you know that I have what you have, it entrenches peace. So if you have nuclear weapon and I have nuclear weapon, then we entrench peace. But more and more, we are being reminded that the paradox of security is looking more that which makes the country or the states secured makes the citizens insecure. So to the extent that the more the citizens see armored tanks and guns, the more they feel insecure. So what do we need to invest in? Conflict prevention, citizens' welfare. So the current assumption is that if you invest in citizens' welfare rather than prepare for war, you are actually entrenching peace and may not need war. So little wonder, even at the highest level, and I've made this allusion several times, even within the circle where I work, that it is mind-boggling that while we in Africa, for example, we are investing in nuclear family, the international community, the powerful nations on earth are investing in nuclear weapons. So is it not time we need to also have conversation between, as part of the African Union agenda of silencing the gun, we begin to have conversation with the international community, especially those producing this dangerous weapon, about ensuring that they do not allow it to continue to get into the hands of wrong people. Because when we talk about arms proliferation have an origin and has an end.
But that's a bigger conversation because, well, they are cartels. They produce the weapons, they have to sell them. And so if the conversation at the global level doesn't sync with what respective countries or subcontinents will have by way of the problems, then that has to be situated well. So, for example, you take crises like, or conflicts like the clashes that we'll experience intermittently in northern Ghana, Tripoli, for example. The triggering point for a relapse could be land, could be just a little disagreement in a conversation, and then it sparks 10 houses being burnt down, etc. It's the state and those who are ruling the state deficient in identifying or seeing the lack of maybe the policy direction and the structure of policy, so that then that will feed into allocation of resources as to what to do by way of the resolution or post-conflict issues. Are they deficient in that? If we have seen that is the problem, then we have civil society or those who have the knowledge, the skill that could complement that.
I think you just used the right word, which is the triggers. The triggers could be anything. Nobody can determine what a trigger can be. You can't determine a trigger. A trigger could be as little as the way you have looked at me this morning. But what does that tell you? What that tells you is that the conflict simply got stopped. It has not been transformed.
And how would it be transformed? How?
The way to transform conflict is that people now feel confident that once there's an issue, the offender will be punished. However, they are also aware that if you're hurt, there's a place to go for redress. Now, what does that tell you? The first step is to embark, because when the security agents come, they do what they know how to do, which is peace enforcement. I want you to mark the words, peace enforcement. Whether you like it or not, be peaceful. So they forcefully make you to drop your arms. And how do they do that? They overpower you with superior arm. Okay? That's the duty of the police or the army.
But you're saying it's not enough?
It's not enough, because during that conflict, I was hurt. So it is most likely that the human nature, I will revenge if nothing is done to either tell me sorry or to punish you. It's likely I'll revenge. That's the human nature. Therefore, what we need to do is, how do we invest in a process that ensures that those people reconcile? Reconciliation is not an easy thing. Saying sorry is not easy. Forgiving is also not easy. So how do we ensure that we don't take it for granted that because you have enforced peace, there is now peace? That at best will be negative peace. So we need to invest in that reconciliation. The second thing we need to invest in after that reconciliation is a process that allows people to discuss their issues every time it occurs, bearing in mind that conflict in itself is natural.
I'll try and applaud a country that can get it right, like the way you have enumerated over the last few minutes. But thank you very much. I've enjoyed the conversation. And your main event will be where?
It's on the 26th at the Tank Palace Hotel. That is where we are going to have the anniversary and the inauguration of the first ever West Africa Peacebuilding Fellows, which is bringing together 20 distinguished West African citizens who have contributed to peace and security in a minimum of 20 in the past 20 years of our history. Then, of course, the award night will be at the Best Western Hotel, which also, of course, we are partnering with your outfit to make sure that the whole world also hear about the event.
Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you
and
so much.
Dr. Chukwu Emeka Eze is Executive Director for the West Africa Network for Peace. They mark 20 years of existence, but we're engaging them on various aspects of peace building, but also great interactions on conflict and its resolution. And an eye-opener is, after we have forced people to stop being in a conflict situation. It's the aftermath that is important, and the policy direction on investments, engagements in what should create the peace after the conflict has been stopped is also important. Great lessons there this morning. I hope that we'll get there one day, but this is where we're getting this morning.